Well, I wanted to go over how you get started in InDesign making your portfolio. So if you go to Architecture 3 classwork, going to go to the portfolio section, you'll see this assignment, BDS portfolio. Scroll down until you see this file to download, and I'm going to click on that and download it. It should pop up right here. I already have it open, so let me close this one. So once that is there, you can just double click it and it should open right up in InDesign as long as you're already signed into Creative Cloud. If you're not, you'll need to sign back into Creative Cloud. So over here, I'm going to click this button here to expand this to be my whole screen so I have as much space as possible. Right now I'm in preview mode, which means that I see the paper just as it's going to print. This is the first page. Then it shows pages and spreads. So if you can imagine a booklet, this is the left page of the booklet, this is the right page of the booklet, as if you were to print it out double-sided. So the back of this page is this page. But InDesign also has lots of cool margins and things that help you get things in place. So in order to see all those, I'm going to go over to View, Screen Mode, and change it to Normal. So that's going to show me my margins, which are those pink lines and the purple lines. It's going to show me all my text is in these blue boxes. That's because they are on a layer that's blue. So we'll talk about that in a second. You'll see these light blue, these very light blue lines are guides. Those help you keep spacing the same throughout. And then you'll see these boxes with X's in those, and those are ready to accept images. So in terms of the interface, if yours does not look the same as mine, if you go to Window, Workspace, and change it to Essentials Classic, it should look like this. There are lots and lots of tools. We won't use all of them, but we'll use some of them. So a quick overview of where some things are. This is a direct selection tool that allows you to select things. You can click, drag, and lasso things to select them. This is a direct selection tool. So for example, if I just wanted to select one, let me zoom in. To zoom in, you do Control plus, zoom out, Control minus. So I zoom into here. If I use my direct selection tool, I can change this frame and make it bigger or smaller. But let's say I just want to bring in one corner of it. I can use my direct selection tool and just select one corner, and then I can bring that tool in. So it allows you to select individual pieces instead of the whole thing. I'm going to Control Z to undo that. Now you might notice when I was doing that in InDesign, InDesign is a layout program. It's not an image editor in the same way Photoshop is. So generally, the three programs we'll end up using a lot are Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign. Photoshop is really great with raster images. So that's like a photograph you take that's made up of lots and lots of little dots. So most images are like this. So for example, if I just look at any JPEG really. So images, so I'm going to save images, save it. So if I open up this image, if I zoom in enough, eventually you're going to see tons of little dots that make up the image, and it only becomes clear when you get farther away from it. So Photoshop is great with images like that. Illustrator is great with things like logos or line drawings that are made up of lines. So if I go to Illustrator, and these graphics are called vector graphics. Giving this a second to open up. So if I open up this drawing and zoom in on it, no matter how far in I get, it's always going to be crisp because it's determined by vectors or by shapes that are connected to coordinates. Like these curves are all all mathematically based on a series of coordinates. So we use those a lot for logos so that you can make your logo big or small. We use it for architectural drawings because they get printed out at lots of different sizes, but that's when you use Illustrator a lot. InDesign is really specialized to help you lay things out into a booklet, and it allows you to put images and text together neatly. It allows you to add page numbers, and it allows you to have lots of images in one document without having a slow document, because the images won't actually live here. This is just a link to the image while you're working, and then when you export it, that image comes in, and I can explain it a little bit more later. So that was our direct selection tool. This is your type tool. So if you select on that, click and drag, you can type in there. If you want to change any of your text properties up in this bar, you'll see you can change your font here. You can change the size of it here. If the font comes in bold, so if I go to, let me think which one might come in bold too. So if I go to, we have Arial in here. If I go to Arial, I have options to change it to bold or to narrow, regular. Those options will be in there. I can also expand text in different ways. So I can stretch my text out vertically. I can stretch it in horizontally. I can tilt it. So generally I would not recommend playing with those too much, but they do have some fun things you can do with text in those options. Oh, finally I can change the color. So if you select the text, you can click on this T and you can pick any of your swatches over here. You can also make a new swatch. So if you hit plus, double click on here, and then you can pick new colors. And you can pick between, like, depending on the color mode you want to use. If you do like Pantone and cement coated, there's lots of different options of colors that you can put in there. So if I want to do a blue, hit OK. That's now going to change the color of my text. All right, lines. So that's to make a line. It's going to show up as invisible until you give it a weight. To give it a weight, you can come over here to the stroke panel. And I can make it, a 1 point line is like a pretty thin line. 0.25 is a very thin line. It's just visible. A really thick line is like a 7 or an 8. So maybe I'll make like a 3 there. I can also change the properties of the line here. So I can make it a dashed line. I can change how big that dash is. So it would just be like a 5-point dash. They have lots of other ones too. They have dots, they have wavy lines. That all lives in here. And I can change the color of this. So if I want to change the color of the stroke, I can change it either down here or up here. If I double click down here, I can just pick a new color on there and hit OK. That'll change it. Or I can always pick a swatch. So if I hit cancel, I can go here and I can pick one of my swatch colors. The nice thing about swatches is that it keeps colors consistent throughout your project, and you can always find those over here. So either I can do it, so I'm down here, I can select that instead, and it'll change that color. Okay, so that was the line tool. There's also a pen tool. So it works similarly where you can create different kinds of curves, and then you can change the colors down here. This is the fill color, that is the stroke color. If you want to make this less opaque, you can come over here, bring down the opacity, make that less opaque. So it has some tools similar to Illustrator that you can actually draw with. Continuation of those tools, pencil tool, rectangle frame tool is a special one, and we'll talk about that more. But essentially, when you make a rectangle frame tool, you can then fill this with an image that gets placed in. There's a couple of ways to place in an image. My favorite way is to find the image. So I'm going to go back to that dog image. I usually just drag it right in. And actually, I might have clicked on the wrong thing there. I think I might have tried to drag in this whole folder. Hang on, it's thinking. So if you try to drag in a whole folder, it might freeze your computer, as you can see, because it's trying to read all the images in that folder, which is not going to work. So I'm going to hit end task on that. Okay, I'll open that back up. Luckily, it did save a version of this, which is great. Okay, so if I come back up here to my rectangle tool, let's say I now want to bring an image into there. I'm going to open up Windows Explorer down here. I'm going to find the image I want to bring in, and I'm just going to click and drag it into the box. So you'll notice automatically it usually is set to fit right in there. It fits all the content proportionally. If I want to change that, I can right click, go to fitting, and I could do something like fill frame proportionally. That'll fill the whole frame. Let's say I just want the dog. I can drag the sides of this and just have the dog. Let's say I want this whole thing to be bigger. Now, if I just drag the side of this, it's just going to make the frame bigger. If I wanted to change the whole thing, I hold down Control and Shift, and then I can resize it that way. Some of your computers might have that set the opposite, where when you do this, it without hitting anything, it might resize it, versus when you hold Control and Shift, that might change the frame. So experiment. If it's not doing what you want it to do one way, try doing Control Shift and see if that does what you want. So I'm going to right click on here and go back to fit content proportionally. And then I can double click on the sides of it to make the frame fit the image. Okay, so that's your rectangle tool, shape tool, and anytime there's like a little hold down menu there, there's other ones. So this is just to make different kinds of shapes. Again, you would change the fills down here. Excuse me. The cut tool allows you to make a break in a point. So if I were to cut there and there, I then could use my direct selection tool, select the middle, and I should be able to delete just that part. And hang on, let me bring this somewhere I can see it a little bit better. Yeah, so I cut that piece off, basically. It made it a separate piece. Free transform tool. So I hold down there. What else do they have? Rotate tool, scale tool. So these things you could pretty much get to using shortcuts. But let's say I didn't want to use my shortcut. So if I click on this, if I go to my free transform tool, I then am able to resize it. However, if you hold down Shift, it'll do it proportionally so you don't stretch things out weird like I just did. If you go to rotate, you can rotate your image around. You should be able to rotate your image around by clicking on that and dragging. If you hold that down, scale tool is making it all bigger, and shear tool allows you to stretch it out one way or another. Okay. Gradient tool, we're probably not going to use, honestly, but let's say I want to change this to a gradient. I would click on my gradient tool, and then I would click and drag down from top to bottom, and that would make it into a gradient. And then if I click on here, or double click here, I can change, oh, that's not right. I double click on here. Okay, so I double click on there, I can change what colors those gradients are by clicking here. At least I should be able to do that. Okay, so there's gradient swatches. I'm going to say it back to you on that. Normally, I've been able to just double click on those and change the colors. That seems to not be working. So if you're interested in using the gradient tool, let me know and I can look into why that's not working right, or working the way I think it should. Okay. So gradient feather tool, we're not going to worry about. Note tool, we're not going to worry about. Color theme tool, most of these things you don't have to worry about. Hand tool is helpful in that it lets you just kind of move things around. So that's there. And zoom tool, you can zoom into one little area if you would like. You can also just do Control minus Control plus to zoom in and out though. Okay, so that is the side. Pages. Pages are super important because they help you see how everything is laid out. If you want to delete something, so let's say you want to get rid of this whole spread, you can Shift, Control both to get them selected, and you just hit delete. You right click and do delete spread. And then, okay, I should be able to undo that. Yep, so that's right back. Let's say I want to reorder it and put this page after those. I just click, drag it in, and I can reorder it that way. So page view is very helpful. It's also where you edit masters. So masters are things that apply over multiple pages. If I double click on master, you'll see that the grid and the page numbers are something I applied to all the pages. So I made that on here, and then I drag this onto one of those pages, and it brought those properties over to it. So that's more advanced. Don't have to worry about it yet, but that's where that lives if you're wondering what that is. Layers. So layers are very helpful. This is why they're helpful. So if I go to my layer tool, and let's say I want, I'm going to keep images here. I'm going to put my text all on my text layer. So if I select the objects and then drag the bubble over to the other one, that'll move them. So what's nice about it is it can be hard sometimes when you have a lot of stuff to select just one thing. So if I lock that, now I can move this without worrying about accidentally selecting something on my text layer. It also helps automatically ensure that all the text will be above all the images. I can also drag this down under, and now it's behind the images. So they're good for making it easier to lock things or not. You don't have to use them. Your project will work if you don't use them, but it's nice. It's a nice organization thing to have. Really important here is links. So links, all these images, as I said before, don't actually live in this document. They live elsewhere. So you'll notice I dragged this in from my downloads. If I were to move this into this folder, you'll notice this little question mark comes up, and because it can no longer find the image. Whenever you're working, you want to make sure that you can always keep your images in the same place, work on the same computer, so that InDesign can find those images for you. And at the end, you'll do something called packaging it, which will keep your whole project together. So that way, when you're looking at this, the images come out nice and crisp, they download, they work. So if you ever have that question mark, you'll need to refine the image. So you would right click, hit relink, and then you would need to actually find where it is. So I think I moved into this folder, and then I just hit open, and now it's relinked and it's happy. This is the stroke panel. We looked at this earlier. The only thing we didn't do is you can also put start and end things on there. So if you want to put on circles, you want to put on arrows, whatever, that's on there. This is for colors. You can pick colors here. And notice they also pop up down here. You can also move these back and forth to change your colors. This is the swatch panel. So they give you some swatches by default. You can also add some more swatches. So if you go to new swatch, double click on here, you can change the color mode to something else, and then that'll give you all of the colors in that library to pick from. Paragraph tools. So this is great for when you are working with text. You can select them, you can justify it. This just works like Word, right? Like you guys have seen all these in a word processor. And these are additional tools depending on how you want your text to look that you can work. One thing I often uncheck is hyphenate. Hyphenating is when it has that like weird dash. So if I put that back on and make this smaller, you'll notice there's like a weird dash that it splits it up. I hate when it does that. So I prefer to not have hyphenation. Anytime you see this little plus sign, It means that there's missing text because the box is not big enough, so you need to make the box bigger so you can see it. I don't want you to worry about character styles yet or paragraph styles. That's something that when you're a more advanced user, you can use. The last thing that is helpful is this align button. So like, let's say I wanted these two things to be aligned here. I can hit align. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong thing. I would hit align and I could hit align object. So if I select those two and click on align objects, that will make them align on one side and also align their centers. I can align them horizontally so that I can align the bottoms of them. So those are really helpful for getting things aligned. They also do distribute objects, which might be my favorite thing. So let's say you decide to do a whole series of circles, but you didn't really like carefully make them evenly spaced across. You can select them and distribute them by their centers, and it'll automatically make them like all perfectly nicely spaced. So again, like I could, maybe it's like that to begin with, but when I select them all and click on this one, it'll space them out evenly. And then Pathfinder, also don't need to worry about this quite yet. So that's your basic interface down here. Other than that, up here you have your normal, save, import, place, all those things. We'll talk about those as we use them. Your editing tools, your layout tools, your types. Anytime you're working with type and you want to do something special, it might be living in this menu. Object, this is where there's options for transforming an object, arranging an object, fitting an object. That's all under that. We probably won't use tables much. View, that's where we go and we change what our view looks like, whether we're in normal or we're in preview view. You can also show grids, all those things, zoom in, zoom out. A window shows all these extra little windows. The only one that wasn't on here that I might want to talk about is effects. So if you click on effects there, effects is a great place to change opacity. So for example, let's say I want the dog to have a blue face. I could move this over here, change my effects on it from normal to multiply, and then it becomes kind of like a see-through thing. And you can play with all these different ones to find the effect that you're looking for. But that's always a really nice thing to use. And beyond that, you could also do an overlay and change the opacity if you just want to be super light or not super obvious. So I could go to luminosity and I can make it, that would make it like, I just darken it a little bit, or I could go to multiply. Maybe it just wants to be a little bit blue, not super blue. And you can do it separately for the stroke and fill. So maybe you want the stroke of this to be a really dark color. Let's make sure we can actually see the stroke. Okay, so let me zoom in. So I can change my stroke to have a normal opacity that's 100%, but the fill maybe I'm going to bring down to 23%, and it gets pretty transparent. So those are some fun tools you can use as well. Okay, so that was a basic, and also, sorry, over here are rollers. Right now it's in points. Let me see if I can change that. So if I go to document setup, I guess you can't in this one. Okay. So never mind about that. I'm going to leave it alone. So that's all I'm going to go over for an interface for now. Check the next video and we'll talk about how you start bringing, how to use this template and how you start bringing in your images.